Have you ever been reading a book or watching a movie that's been translated, and you just get this feeling? You wonder, does this feel the same as it does in the original language? We tend to think of translation as just a simple word-for-word swap. But that's where it gets really interesting. So let's pull back the curtain and see how it really works.
Okay, just look at this classic example. The English idiom, "It's raining cats and dogs." Now, if you translate that literally word for word into German, you get "Es regnet Katzen und Hunde." And to a German speaker, that's just nonsense. It makes absolutely no sense. The words are right, but the meaning, it's completely lost. This right here is the perfect example of the problem. A translation can be 100% accurate with the words, but be 100% total failure at communication.
So, okay, if a direct swap is a total fail, then what's the alternative? This is the exact puzzle that a group of really brilliant thinkers in Germany were trying to solve back in the 70s and 80s. They just knew there had to be a better way. And the answer they came up with? It was a complete game changer, a truly radical idea. Stop focusing on the words themselves. Instead, they said, let's focus on the purpose. The question was no longer, what do these words mean? It became, what is this text supposed to do? And this whole revolution in thinking? Well, it really got started with one simple but honestly profound question from a theorist named Reiss. She just asked, what is the text's job?
Reiss's big idea was that we all need to zoom out, stop looking at the individual bricks and start looking at the entire building. Before you even think about translating a single word, you have to ask, what's the main function of this piece of writing? Is it just here to inform me, like a news report? Is it supposed to move me emotionally, like a poem? Or is it trying to get me to do something?
And she broke it all down into these three key types. First, you've got informative texts. Think a news report. Their only job is to give you facts. Then you have expressive texts, like a poem, where the art, the style, the beauty of the language, that's the whole point. And finally, operative texts, like an ad, which are designed to make you do something. And her big insight was that you can't possibly translate all three of these the same way. The job of the text has to dictate your entire strategy.
But Reiss's idea, as brilliant as it was just the beginning. Her student, Hans Vermeer, basically took this idea of purpose and cranked it up to 11. He developed this incredibly powerful theory known as Skopos theory.
And his whole theory, it all hinges on this one Greek word, skopos. It simply means purpose or aim. And for Vermeer, this single idea was about to turn centuries of translation tradition completely on its head.
And this is the core of it, right here. Vermeer said that every single decision a translator makes, every word choice, every turn of phrase, should be guided by the purpose of the final translated text. The focus completely shifts away from perfectly copying the original text and onto what this new version needs to accomplish for its new audience. You really can't overstate how revolutionary this was. It basically dethroned the original source text. I mean, for centuries, the source was seen as this sacred, untouchable thing, and Vermeer just comes along and says, nope, not anymore. The new goal wasn't perfect, rigid equivalence, it was functional adequacy. The only question that really mattered was, does the translation work?
Vermeer even laid out this clear hierarchy of rules. And the order here is everything. At the very top, number 1, is the Skopos rule. The purpose is king. That overrules everything else. Below that is the coherence rule. The translation has to actually make sense to the new reader. And then way down at the bottom, in third place, is the fidelity rule. It should have some connection to the original. Think about that for a second. Being faithful to the source is the least important rule. Wow.
Now, you might be thinking, hold on, does this just give translators a free pass to do whatever they want as long as it fits some purpose? And that's a really good question. It's one that another theorist, Christiane Nord, tackled by creating a more balanced, practical model.
So, Nord totally agreed that function was the most important thing, but she brought in this crucial check and balance, the principle of loyalty. She argued that a translator is like a bridge. They have a deep responsibility to the new reader to make sure the text works for them, but they also have a loyalty to the original author to respect what they were trying to do. It's this perfect middle ground between total freedom and just being a copy machine.
And to make this super practical, Nord gave us these two incredibly useful categories. First, there's a documentary translation. Think of it like a window. The reader knows they're looking into another culture through a translation, like when you read a classic Russian novel. But then you have an instrumental translation, which is more like a tool. The whole point is for the reader to not even notice it's a translation. It should feel like it was written just for them. like a perfectly clear instruction manual for furniture you just bought.
Okay, so we've got all this great theory, but what does it actually look like in the real world? Let's get practical and put it all together with a simple example, translating a children's cookbook. This is where it all clicks into place.
All right, so here's the job. Take a British cookbook for kids and translate it for several other European countries. Simple enough, right? Well, here was the catch. To save money, the publisher insisted on keeping all the original illustrations, and that created some interesting challenges.
So picture this. You're the translator. One of the recipes shows a picture of a very specific British-style potato masher. But you're translating the book for kids in France or Spain, where that tool isn't really a thing. You're stuck with the picture. It can't be changed. So what do?
And this is where Scopos theory is just poetry in motion. A literal translation of potato masher would just confuse the kids. So the translators became problem solvers. For the French edition, they suggested using a blender. For the Spanish one, they just said to use a fork. They completely ignored the original word and focused on the function, mashing the potatoes. They even brilliantly added a little note to use an instrument like the one in the picture, connecting it back to the image. It's just so clever.
What this case study shows us is the crucial takeaway from all of this. A modern translator isn't some walking dictionary just swapping words. They're more like a cultural detective, figuring out how to make a text work in a totally new context. Their job is to understand the original purpose and then skillfully recreate that same function for a brand new audience.
So, I want to leave you with this. The next time you pick up a translated book, or watch a subtitled movie, or even just browse a website in another language, I want you to shift your perspective. Instead of just asking, is this a faithful translation? Ask yourself a much more interesting question. What was this thing designed to do? Because once you start looking for the purpose, you start to see the hidden genius of translation absolutely everywhere.